My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI Director, ma'am? My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the cautionary tale of wasted potential. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The daughter who chose security over success, government paperwork over real achievement. The sister who never made anything of herself while everyone else climbed their way to the top. At family gatherings, I became the subject of well-meaning but crushing commentary. My mother would sigh and say things like, "Well, at least Rachel has job security," as if that was the consolation prize for a life without ambition. My father would nod along, occasionally adding, "Government work is stable," the way you might describe oatmeal or beige paint. What they told people was simple. Rachel works for the government. Something with paperwork. Nothing too exciting, but it pays the bills. They had crafted this narrative of me as the family member who had chosen the safe, boring path, the one who lacked the courage or talent to pursue anything truly impressive. The truth was more complicated, but they never bothered to ask for it. When I first started in government work after college, they were cautiously optimistic. My mother made her famous lasagna to celebrate my first real job, and my father actually seemed proud when he told his golf buddies that his daughter was working in Washington. They had visions of political connections and important meetings, maybe even a path to something glamorous. For the first few years, I sent updates about training programs and departmental transfers. I kept everything vague but positive. Learning a lot in the new position. The work is challenging but rewarding. Hope everyone's doing well. I sent occasional photos from government buildings and work events, always careful to keep things appropriately general. Then the updates became more infrequent and eventually stopped altogether. What they knew was this. I worked for various government agencies, moving from position to position without any clear advancement pattern, no promotions they could brag about, no impressive titles they could drop at dinner parties. Just a daughter who seemed to drift through federal bureaucracy without ever making a mark. My younger sister Emma, meanwhile, had launched herself into the entertainment industry and was making waves as a successful actress. She booked commercials, then television shows, then supporting roles in major films. By her late 20s, she had representation with one of Hollywood's top talent agencies and was attending red carpet premieres. The contrast became impossible to ignore. Emma had headshots on the refrigerator and entertainment industry connections. I had whatever it was I did in those anonymous government buildings. At Emma's movie premieres and award show after-parties, I became the family member who needed explanation. "That's Rachel, Emma's sister," people would say. "She works for the government." Something administrative. The conversations would quickly move on to more interesting topics. My extended family developed their own theories about my lack of conventional success. Some thought I lacked ambition. Others assumed I couldn't handle pressure. A few suggested I was too comfortable with mediocrity to push for anything better. The family jokes started small, but grew more pointed over time. At birthday dinners, someone would inevitably ask, "So Rachel, still pushing papers around DC?" At holiday gatherings, relatives would make comments about real jobs and making something of yourself. The laughter was always gentle, but the message was clear. I was the family underachiever. My mother tried to be supportive, but her efforts often stung worse than outright criticism. "I just wish you'd find something that makes you feel fulfilled," she'd say. "Look at Emma. She found her passion and pursued it. Maybe it's not too late for you to find yours." What they didn't understand, what they never asked, was that I had found my passion. I was pursuing it every single day. But the nature of my work required them to believe I was exactly what they thought. A forgettable bureaucrat shuffling papers in a windowless office somewhere in the federal maze. And for 15 years, I let them believe it. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI director, ma'am? While I became the family's example of unrealized potential, my sister Emma transformed into everything they had dreamed a successful daughter could be. Where I brought quiet disappointment, she brought excitement and glamour. Where I offered vague government work, she delivered red carpets and magazine covers. Emma's career trajectory read like a Hollywood fairy tale. After graduating from UCLA with a theater degree, she moved to Los Angeles with nothing but determination and undeniable talent. Within 6 months, she'd landed her first commercial, a national campaign for a major cosmetics brand that ran during primetime television. From there, her ascent was meteoric. Supporting roles in indie films led to recurring characters on popular TV dramas. By her late 20s, she was booking leading roles in major studio productions and working with A-list directors. Her Instagram account boasted 2 million followers, and entertainment magazines regularly featured her on their covers. The contrast couldn't have been more perfect for my parents. While they struggled to explain what I did for work, they could effortlessly brag about Emma's latest project to anyone who would listen. "Our daughter Emma is filming in Vancouver right now," my mother would beam at the grocery store. "She's working with that actor from the Marvel movies. You know the one." Emma understood her role as the family success story and embraced it completely. She brought my parents to movie premieres, where they walked red carpets and posed for photographers. She flew them to award shows as her guests, giving them access to after-parties where they mingled with celebrities and industry executives. My father, who had spent my entire childhood emphasizing the importance of practical careers, suddenly became an expert on Hollywood insider politics. He learned the names of directors, producers, and studio executives. He could discuss box office numbers and award season predictions with the confidence of a seasoned entertainment journalist. The transformation was remarkable. At family gatherings, conversations revolved entirely around Emma's projects, her co-stars, her upcoming roles. My mother kept scrapbooks filled with magazine clippings and premiere photos. My father had memorized Emma's filmography and could recite her career highlights to anyone who asked. Emma's success wasn't just professional, it was social currency. Through her career, my parents gained access to exclusive events, celebrity charity galas, and industry parties. They became the couple who could casually mention dining with famous actors or attending private screenings of major releases. The financial rewards were equally impressive. Emma's success allowed her to buy my parents a new house in an upscale neighborhood, complete with a pool and guest quarters for when she visited between filming locations. She took them on luxury vacations to exotic destinations and made sure they never worried about money again. Her talent agency, Creative Management Associates, treated our entire family like VIPs. When Emma signed with them, it wasn't just her career that elevated. Our family's entire social status shifted. CMA represented some of the biggest names in entertainment. And being Emma Morgan's family meant invitations to exclusive industry events and access to circles most people could only dream of entering. The agency's senior partner, David Kellerman, became almost like family himself. He attended our holiday dinners, knew our family dynamics, and treated my parents with the kind of attention that made them feel genuinely important. When David spoke, my parents listened as if he were delivering wisdom from entertainment industry Mount Olympus. Emma's achievements weren't just celebrated, they were documented, publicized, and shared with anyone who would listen. Her success became the family's success, proof that the Morgan name meant something in Hollywood. Meanwhile, I remained the footnote, the sister whose boring government job paled in comparison to Emma's glamorous career. The irony was devastating. While my family celebrated Emma's ability to command attention on movie sets and red carpets, they had no idea that their other daughter commanded something far more powerful. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs, while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. FBI director, ma'am? While my family celebrated Emma's Hollywood success and dismissed my government career, I lived in a world that operated by rules they couldn't imagine. My days began at 5 a.m. with classified briefings that shaped national security policy. My phone carried encryption software that protected communications between the highest levels of law enforcement and intelligence agencies. I lived in a secure condominium in Arlington, Virginia, where my lease listed my occupation simply as, quote, federal employee. My neighbors knew me as Rachel Morgan, the quiet woman who traveled frequently and kept unusual hours. They never questioned why unmarked government vehicles occasionally parked outside my building or why men in dark suits sometimes escorted me to waiting cars. My mail was delivered to a secured federal facility and forwarded through channels that scrubbed any identifying information. My bank statements showed regular deposits from the Department of Justice, but the specific division remained classified even from financial institutions. My tax returns were processed through a special office that handled sensitive government personnel. When I went grocery shopping, I paid with credit cards that were monitored by cybersecurity teams. When I traveled, my movements were coordinated with field offices across the country and sometimes internationally. My car was equipped with communication systems that could reach any FBI facility in the United States within seconds. I had no social media presence under my real name. No LinkedIn profile advertising my career progression. No Facebook photos from bureau events. No Instagram stories from the countless high-security facilities I visited. As far as the digital world was concerned, Rachel Morgan was exactly what my family believed, a mid-level government employee with an unremarkable career. My closet contained 2 distinct wardrobes: the conservative business attire appropriate for a bureaucrat attending routine meetings, and the formal clothing required for occasions when representing the highest levels of federal law enforcement. I owned exactly 4 dresses suitable for White House state dinners and congressional hearings. My daily routine was unpredictable in ways that would have terrified my family if they'd understood the implications. Some days I'd spend hours in the J. Edgar Hoover building, coordinating with counterterrorism units and reviewing threat assessments that could affect millions of Americans. Other days I'd disappear entirely, attending classified briefings at secure locations that didn't appear on any public maps. The work demanded absolute compartmentalization. I attended meetings where Supreme Court justices sought my counsel on matters of national security. I participated in video conferences with foreign intelligence leaders, discussing threats that transcended international boundaries. I reviewed case files that contained evidence of conspiracies involving elected officials, foreign operatives, and domestic terrorists. Then I'd return to my Arlington apartment and microwave leftover Chinese food while watching Netflix, just like any other single professional woman in the DC area. The isolation was profound but necessary. I couldn't tell college friends why I'd stopped attending reunions. I couldn't explain to former colleagues why my career path seemed so erratic from the outside. I couldn't share with my family why I couldn't visit for holidays, or why I sometimes disappeared for weeks without explanation. Some evenings, I'd sit in my apartment and wonder what it would feel like to have a normal conversation about work. To complain about office politics that didn't involve national security implications. To discuss career goals that didn't require security clearances and background investigations. But then my secure phone would buzz with an urgent alert, a terrorist threat requiring immediate attention, a cybersecurity breach affecting critical infrastructure, or an international incident demanding coordination with foreign law enforcement agencies. I'd remember why the sacrifice of normalcy mattered. While my family worried about my lack of ambition and visible success, I was preventing crimes that could destabilize the country, managing investigations that protected American citizens from threats they would never know existed, and making decisions that influenced law enforcement policy at the highest levels of government. The woman they saw as a career underachiever was actually commanding the most powerful investigative force in the world. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs, while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. "FBI director, ma'am?" The turning point came on a Friday afternoon in November, during what should have been a routine cybersecurity assessment at the FBI's Criminal Justice Information Services Division in Clarksburg, West Virginia. I was 6 years into my career as a special agent, working in the cybercrime unit, when everything I thought I knew about my future changed forever. I had been investigating a series of sophisticated cyber attacks targeting financial institutions across the eastern seaboard. The attacks appeared unrelated, different methods, different targets, different digital signatures. But something in the patterns bothered me. Inconsistencies that suggested a level of coordination that my superiors weren't seeing. While my colleagues focused on individual incidents, I spent 3 sleepless nights mapping the attacks chronologically and geographically. What I discovered made my blood run cold. The seemingly random cyber strikes were actually reconnaissance missions, probing the security infrastructure of institutions that collectively held access to the Federal Reserve's emergency protocols. The attackers weren't trying to steal money. They were mapping the digital architecture needed to crash the entire American banking system. I brought my findings to my unit chief, Assistant Director Patricia Vance, expecting immediate escalation to the highest levels of law enforcement. Instead, I was told that my analysis was speculative and that I should focus on provable cases rather than conspiracy theories. But I couldn't let it go. Not when I realized that the next phase of attacks was likely imminent, and that the targets would be the Federal Reserve banks in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco simultaneously. A coordinated strike that could trigger a financial crisis worse than 2008. I made a decision that would end my conventional FBI career track forever. I took my research directly to the Deputy Director's office, bypassing 3 levels of command structure. I knew it would destroy my relationships within the Bureau hierarchy, but I couldn't live with the alternative. Within 72 hours, my analysis had been proven correct. The FBI's Cyber Division intercepted communications confirming a planned attack on the exact targets I'd identified, scheduled for the following Monday morning. Emergency protocols were implemented across the financial sector, and a joint task force involving the FBI, NSA, and Treasury Department was formed to prevent the attack. The operation succeeded. We traced the attack network to a state-sponsored group operating out of Eastern Europe and prevented what could have been the most devastating cyber attack in American history. 17 arrests were made internationally, and digital evidence revealed plans for follow-up attacks on power grids and transportation systems. But publicly, none of that could be acknowledged. The success of the operation required absolute secrecy, admitting that foreign actors had come so close to crippling the American financial system would have created the very panic we'd worked to prevent. Someone had to take responsibility for the procedural irregularities that had led to the crisis, even though those irregularities had actually prevented it. Someone had to be the scapegoat for a security breach that had been neutralized before it could cause damage. That someone was me. The official story was carefully constructed. Special Agent Rachel Morgan had violated protocol by conducting unauthorized analysis outside her assigned cases. She had bypassed chain of command and created disruption within established bureau procedures. While no criminal charges would be filed, her actions demonstrated poor judgment and unsuitability for continued field work. What my family read in the brief news coverage was exactly what the bureau intended. Their daughter had screwed up, overstepped her authority, and been quietly reassigned to minimize further damage to the FBI's reputation. What they never knew was that my punishment was actually a promotion to a position so classified it didn't officially exist. The deputy director had been watching my work for months, and my willingness to risk my career to prevent a national catastrophe had marked me for something extraordinary. The conditions were non-negotiable. I could never tell anyone what really happened. I would have to let my family believe I had failed, because my new role required invisibility that only professional disgrace could provide. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI director, ma'am? What my family never knew was that my career setback had launched me into the most classified leadership position in American law enforcement. I became the director of the FBI's Special Operations Division, a position so sensitive it didn't appear on any organizational chart, and reported directly to the FBI director and the President's National Security Council. My new role involved overseeing operations that conventional FBI divisions couldn't touch: domestic terrorism networks with international connections, cyber warfare campaigns targeting critical infrastructure, and criminal conspiracies involving foreign intelligence services. I commanded resources that spanned multiple agencies and had authorization levels that superseded normal bureaucratic boundaries. Within my first year in the position, I coordinated a joint operation that dismantled a human trafficking network operating across 17 states. The investigation involved undercover operations in 6 countries, coordination with Interpol, and the rescue of over 200 victims. The criminal organization had connections to foreign organized crime syndicates and corrupted officials in 3 federal agencies. I spent 8 months orchestrating an operation that prevented a domestic terrorist group from bombing the Philadelphia subway system during rush hour. The case required infiltrating a network of radicalized individuals who had acquired military-grade explosives and were planning coordinated attacks designed to cause maximum civilian casualties. We arrested 43 people and seized enough explosive material to level several city blocks. My division's analysis of cryptocurrency transactions led to the exposure of a massive money laundering operation that was financing terrorist activities in the Middle East and Africa. Working with the Treasury Department and international banking authorities, we traced $400 million in illegal transactions and identified funding sources for terrorist operations in 7 countries. But perhaps my most significant achievement was Operation Digital Shield, a 3-year investigation into foreign interference in American elections. My team identified and neutralized cyber operations conducted by hostile foreign governments, including sophisticated disinformation campaigns, voter database infiltration attempts, and attacks on election infrastructure. The operation required coordinating with all 50 state election boards, the Department of Homeland Security, the NSA, and foreign intelligence services from allied nations. We prevented multiple attempts to manipulate election results and documented evidence of foreign interference that led to sanctions against 3 countries and the indictment of dozens of foreign intelligence operatives. The work demanded skills I never knew I possessed. I became fluent in digital forensics, international law, and psychological operations. I learned to coordinate multi-agency task forces involving thousands of personnel across multiple time zones. I developed expertise in counter-surveillance, threat assessment, and crisis management. Most importantly, I learned to command at the highest levels. By my 8th year in the position, I was regularly briefing the President, advising the Attorney General, and coordinating with the directors of the CIA, NSA, and Department of Homeland Security. Congressional leaders sought my assessment before passing legislation affecting national security. Foreign law enforcement agencies requested my assistance with international cases. My security clearance transcended normal classifications. I had access to intelligence that was shared with fewer than 20 people in the entire government. I attended meetings where decisions affecting global stability were made based on intelligence my division had gathered. I sat in situation rooms where the president authorized operations that could prevent wars or stop terrorist attacks. When there was a credible threat to American national security anywhere in the world, my secure phone was among the first to ring. When Congress needed assessment of domestic terrorism threats, my analysis shaped their decisions. When foreign governments needed assistance with cases involving American citizens, they contacted my office directly. The woman my family saw as a career disappointment was actually one of the most powerful law enforcement officials in the American government. While they worried about my lack of visible success, I was preventing terrorist attacks, dismantling criminal networks, and protecting American democracy from foreign interference on a scale they couldn't imagine. But maintaining that power required absolute secrecy. And secrecy meant letting my family believe I was exactly what they thought: a mid-level bureaucrat who had never amounted to anything special. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was. Until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI director, ma'am? While I was preventing national security crises and commanding the most classified operations in federal law enforcement, my family's disappointment in my career stagnation only intensified. What had started as gentle concern about my professional trajectory evolved into genuine embarrassment about my apparent inability to achieve anything meaningful. The family gatherings became exercises in careful topic avoidance. Every holiday, birthday, and celebration was another opportunity for my family to highlight the contrast between Emma's soaring success and my apparent mediocrity. At Emma's movie premieres, industry parties, and award ceremonies, I was either not invited or quietly discouraged from attending. "We just think it might be awkward," my mother would explain when explaining why I wasn't included in family photos with Emma's famous co-stars. "You know how these Hollywood people are. They're very focused on success stories." The worst part was overhearing how they talked about me when they thought I was out of earshot. At Emma's engagement party to her co-star from her latest blockbuster, I heard my father telling David Kellerman, Emma's agent, "We're very proud of Emma, of course. Rachel, well, she chose a different path. Government work, you know. Very stable, but not particularly ambitious." My mother's attempts at maternal support often stung worse than outright criticism. She would call with job suggestions gleaned from conversations with other parents, whose children had real careers. "Mrs. Davidson from the book club mentioned that her daughter's marketing firm is hiring," she'd say. "I know it's not government work, but maybe it's time to try something in the private sector, something where you could actually advance." The family group chat became a daily reminder of my perceived inadequacy. Emma would share behind-the-scenes photos from movie sets, updates about meetings with directors, and excitement about upcoming projects. My parents would respond with enthusiasm and pride, sharing Emma's posts on their own social media accounts, with captions like, "So proud of our star." Meanwhile, my contributions to family conversations became increasingly unwelcome. When I tried to engage, asking about Emma's projects or commenting on family updates, my messages often went unanswered or received brief, polite responses that made it clear I was interrupting more important discussions. The breaking point came during Emma's birthday party at an exclusive restaurant in Beverly Hills. I had flown out from D.C., taking time off from a counterterrorism operation to attend. Instead of family bonding, I found myself standing alone while Emma's Hollywood friends and industry colleagues dominated every conversation. When David Kellerman introduced me to a studio executive as Emma's sister, the one who works for the government, the man's interest visibly evaporated. "Oh, bureaucracy," he said dismissively. "Must be very structured." He walked away before I could respond. Later that evening, I overheard Emma telling a group of her actress friends, "Rachel's the practical one in the family. She chose security over dreams, you know? Someone has to be the responsible sister." The casual dismissal, the assumption that I had settled for less because I couldn't achieve more, crystallized years of accumulated frustration. My father stopped asking about my work entirely, clearly uncomfortable with having no impressive details to share with his friends, who bragged about their children's corporate successes and entrepreneurial ventures. My mother's calls became lectures about making the most of your potential and finding something that really challenges you. Extended family members developed their own explanations for my apparent lack of achievement. Some attributed it to risk aversion. Others suggested I was overwhelmed by Emma's success and had given up competing. A few whispered that I simply lacked the drive that had made Emma a star. The isolation became complete. I was surrounded by family who loved me, but could no longer respect me. They had created such a comprehensive narrative around my professional mediocrity that any evidence to the contrary became invisible to them. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs, while while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. "FBI director, ma'am?" The call came at 2:15 a.m. on a Saturday in October, jolting me from the kind of deep sleep that only came after 18-hour days, managing multiple national security crises. My secure phone displayed an unfamiliar number, but the encryption signature indicated it was coming through official FBI channels. "Director Morgan, this is Special Agent Sandra Chen from the Los Angeles field office. I'm sorry to wake you, but we have a situation involving your family." My blood went cold. In my line of work, family emergencies were never just family emergencies. They were potential security breaches, blackmail opportunities, or worse. What kind of situation? Your sister Emma and her fiancé were involved in a serious car accident about 3 hours ago. They're both alive, but Emma is in critical condition at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. Your parents are flying in from Phoenix. The hospital has been trying to reach you through normal channels. I was on a plane to Los Angeles within 4 hours, having coordinated with the LA field office to ensure appropriate security protocols were maintained while I dealt with the family crisis. My deputy director would handle ongoing operations, and my communications would be rerouted through secure channels to accommodate the temporary location change. Emma spent 3 days in intensive care before stabilizing. During that time, our family dynamics played out in the sterile environment of a hospital waiting room. My parents maintained their vigil with the same dedication they brought to everything involving Emma, coordinating with doctors, managing the media interest in her condition, and handling the logistics of her career obligations. David Kellerman, Emma's agent, became almost a 4th family member during the crisis. He managed press statements, coordinated with the studio about her upcoming film project, and handled the business implications of her injuries with the kind of efficiency that reminded me of my own crisis management protocols. I stayed in the background as usual, visiting during off hours and maintaining the low profile that had become second nature. Even in crisis, I remained the family member whose presence was acknowledged but not celebrated, whose support was appreciated but not essential. "Rachel flew in from D.C., I heard my mother telling concerned friends who called. "It's good to have the whole family together during something like this." The tone suggested mild surprise that I'd prioritized family over my desk job, as if government work couldn't possibly be important enough to require actual scheduling considerations. As Emma recovered, the conversation turned to the impact on her career. A major studio production had been scheduled to begin filming in 6 weeks, and her injuries would require extensive physical therapy. David worked with the studio to negotiate a delayed start date and modify action sequences to accommodate her recovery timeline. "This is exactly the kind of situation that makes or breaks careers in Hollywood," David explained to my parents as we sat in the hospital cafeteria. "The way we handle this crisis will determine Emma's trajectory for the next decade." The irony wasn't lost on me. While David orchestrated crisis management for Emma's entertainment career, I was simultaneously coordinating the federal response to a terrorist threat in the Midwest, managing an international cybersecurity incident, and overseeing the arrest of foreign intelligence operatives in 3 major cities. But my family saw only David's visible expertise in managing Hollywood crises, completely unaware that their other daughter managed crises that affected national security. When Emma was finally released from the hospital and transferred to a rehabilitation facility, the family decided to celebrate her recovery with a small gathering at my parents' house in Phoenix. David would be there to finalize the revised production schedule and discuss Emma's return-to-work timeline. For the first time in years, I would be attending a family gathering where someone with knowledge of high-level federal operations would be present. Someone who might recognize exactly who Rachel Morgan really was. "My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI director, ma'am? The family gathering at my parents' Phoenix home was exactly what I'd expected, a celebration of Emma's recovery that doubled as a business meeting about her career trajectory. David Kellerman had flown in from Los Angeles with contracts, production schedules, and strategic plans for Emma's return to major studio films. I sat quietly in the living room while my family hung on David's every word about Emma's upcoming projects. He discussed multi-million-dollar deals with the casual confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes negotiations, dropping names of A-list directors and studio executives who were eager to work with Emma once she completed her rehabilitation. The industry has been incredibly supportive, David explained to my parents, who beamed with pride at their daughter's continued relevance despite the accident. Emma's profile has actually increased during her recovery. Sometimes a crisis can elevate an actor's public standing if handled correctly. I remained on the periphery, occasionally refilling coffee cups and ensuring everyone was comfortable, playing the role of the helpful sister whose boring government job gave her flexibility to assist during family emergencies. It was a familiar dynamic. Emma as the center of attention, David as the influential power broker, my parents as the proud supporters, and me as the background presence. That changed when David's phone rang with a call he couldn't ignore. "I'm sorry, I need to take this," he said, glancing at his screen. "It's about a client who's having some federal legal issues. These entertainment lawyers charge by the minute." As David stepped into the kitchen for privacy, I heard fragments of his conversation through the thin walls. Words like federal investigation, FBI warrant, and national security implications caught my attention in ways my family couldn't understand. When David returned to the living room, his confident demeanor had shifted slightly. He looked troubled, distracted by whatever crisis his client was facing. "Everything okay?" my mother asked with the kind of concern that came from years of watching David solve Emma's professional problems. "One of my clients is dealing with some federal complications," David said carefully. "Nothing that affects Emma, but it's a reminder of how quickly things can escalate when federal agencies get involved." My father nodded sympathetically. "Must be frustrating when you can't control the situation. Federal bureaucracy can be so unpredictable." David's phone rang again. This time, when he answered, I heard him say, "No, I understand the urgency, but I need to speak with someone who actually has authority to make decisions about this case." He listened for a moment, then said something that made my chest tighten. "I need to talk to whoever runs the FBI's Special Operations Division. This is way above local field office level." The room went quiet as David continued his conversation, his voice becoming more strained. "What do you mean you can't tell me who that is?" "This is a client emergency involving national security classifications." I watched my family's faces as they processed David's obvious frustration with federal bureaucracy, the same bureaucracy they assumed I was lost somewhere within. They had no idea they were witnessing David's struggle to reach exactly the kind of authority I wielded every day. When David ended the call, he looked genuinely frustrated. "Federal agencies," he said, shaking his head. "They're impossible to navigate. No one will tell you who's actually in charge of anything important." That's when our eyes met across the living room. Something in my expression must have registered with David, because his complaint died mid-sentence. He stared at me for a long moment, his professional instincts clearly processing something that didn't quite fit with what he'd been told about Emma's unremarkable sister. Then, in a voice that carried clearly through the suddenly silent room, David Kellerman looked directly at me and said 5 words that shattered 15 years of family assumptions. "FBI director, ma'am? My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family, I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world, the sister who bounced between government desk jobs while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was, until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. 'FBI director, ma'am?'" The silence that followed David's recognition stretched for what felt like hours. I could hear the air conditioning humming, the distant sound of traffic on the Phoenix freeway, and my father's coffee cup rattling against his saucer as his hands began to shake. Emma, still recovering, and seated in the recliner with her leg elevated, spoke first. "David, what are you talking about? Rachel works for some government office. She's not. She's the director of the FBI's Special Operations Division," David said quietly. his voice carrying the kind of certainty that came from years of researching powerful people in Washington. One of the most classified positions in federal law enforcement. I've been trying to reach her office for 3 days about my client's case. My mother's face went completely pale. Rachel? That's impossible. She doesn't even have a real title. David was still staring at me, and I could see him connecting dots that had been invisible to my family for 15 years. The Special Operations Division reports directly to the FBI Director and the President's National Security Council. There are maybe 20 people in the entire government who know that office exists. Emma tried to sit up straighter, wincing from her injuries. But she works a desk job. She never talks about anything important. Because she can't, David explained, his Hollywood agent instincts fully engaged now. That level of classification requires complete operational secrecy. Her family thinking she's a low-level bureaucrat isn't an accident, it's cover. My father finally found his voice, though it came out as barely a whisper. Rachel, is this true? I looked at my family, really looked at them, for the first time in years. My parents, who had spent 15 years apologizing for my lack of ambition. Emma, who had built her identity around being the successful sister. David, who had unknowingly been trying to reach me through official channels while sitting in my parents' living room. Yes, I said simply. But why didn't you tell us? My mother asked, tears forming in her eyes. All these years we thought, we were so worried about you. Because I couldn't tell you. And because you never asked what I actually did, you only asked when I was going to do something better. Emma was staring at me like I was a stranger. You're the head of FBI Special Operations? The person David's been trying to reach to help his client? David answered before I could. Not just the head. The Director of Special Operations Division is one of the most powerful law enforcement positions in the country. She commands resources that span multiple agencies. When there's a national security crisis that requires coordination between the FBI, CIA, NSA, and Homeland Security, her office runs point. My father set down his coffee cup with shaking hands. All this time, when we said you weren't ambitious enough, when we worried you'd never make something of yourself. You were making jokes about my career at dinner parties while I was preventing terrorist attacks, I finished quietly. Oh God, my mother said, covering her face with her hands. The things we said. The way we treated you. At Emma's birthday party, when I told people you worked in some government office. David was still processing the revelation. My client has been accused of financial crimes connected to foreign money laundering. The case involves international banking laws and potential terrorism financing. I've been told it requires approval from the Special Operations Division. I know about your client, I said. The case crossed my desk 2 weeks ago. Emma looked like she was going to be sick. You knew about David's case before he even got here? I know about most major federal cases that involve entertainment industry figures, especially when they touch on national security issues. The room fell silent again as my family grappled with 15 years of misunderstanding being corrected in a matter of minutes. The sister they'd seen as a career failure was actually operating at levels of government they couldn't even comprehend. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and to my family I was the career failure who couldn't make it in the real world. The sister who bounced between government desk jobs, while never amounting to anything meaningful. They mocked my boring bureaucrat career for years, making jokes about my lack of ambition and success. But they had no idea who I really was. Until my sister's Hollywood agent looked directly at me and said 5 words that changed everything. FBI Director, ma'am? 2 years have passed since David Kellerman spoke those 5 words that changed everything. My family's understanding of who I am has evolved, but more importantly, I've learned something profound about the difference between recognition and purpose. Emma's career recovered beautifully from her accident. She's currently filming her 3rd blockbuster since the revelation, and my parents still beam with pride at her red carpet appearances. The difference now is that they've stopped apologizing for my absence from those events. They finally understand that some invitations I simply cannot accept. My mother calls every Sunday now, though our conversations remain carefully general. She asks about my work with a new tone of respect, and when I tell her I can't discuss specifics, She nods with understanding instead of disappointment. My father has stopped asking when I'm going to find my passion, because he finally realizes I found it 15 years ago. David became an unexpected ally. His client's case was resolved favorably, though he'll never know the full scope of the international operation that made it possible. He occasionally sends updates about entertainment industry legal issues that intersect with federal concerns, maintaining professional boundaries while acknowledging the unique nature of our connection. Last month, I prevented a cyber attack on the power grid that could have left half the eastern seaboard without electricity. The operation required coordination with 6 federal agencies and took 18 hours of sustained crisis management. When it was over, I went home to my Arlington apartment and made leftover pasta while watching Netflix. My secure phone never rang with congratulations from family members, because they'll never know it happened. And I've finally made peace with that reality. The woman who once sat quietly while her family mocked her career now commands a different kind of respect. The kind that comes from protecting millions of Americans from threats they'll never need to fear. Some achievements don't require applause. Some success stories can never be told. My name is Director Rachel Morgan, and while my family finally knows who I am, the most important thing I've learned is this: I never needed their recognition to become exactly who I was meant to be. The work continues, the mission matters, and that has always been enough. Try something I would have. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.